rugged, it's reliable, and it's a total cult classic. Today, we're breaking down everything you need to know about the mighty Nissan Patrol. Picture Japan in 1951. The country is still reeling from the war, and a lot of roads were still under development. This created a demand for a vehicle with extraordinary toughness, something built to connect communities even where the pavement ended. Now, if you saw one today, you'd probably do a double take and think, wait, is that a Willys Jeep? And honestly, you're spot on. Nissan totally leaned into that American military aesthetic that was everywhere in Japan back then. They even called it the Nissan Jeep originally. As you can imagine, the lawyers at Willys weren't exactly thrilled about that. So, by 1958, they pivoted and officially branded it the Patrol. But what makes this so Nissan is what they did under the hood. While the Willys was putting around with its standard Go Devil engine, Nissan went absolute mad scientist. They pulled the NAK engine out of their 290 series bus, yes, a literal bus engine, and stuffed it into this tiny 4x4. We're talking about a 3.7-liter inline-six in 1951. That is massive displacement for a vehicle that size. It only made about 75 horses, but the torque was incredible. In 1960, they dropped the 60 series, and there's a wild bit of history here that most people don't even believe. It was actually the first vehicle to ever cross the Simpson Desert in Australia. It was 1962, and this geologist named Reg Sprigg decided to take his G60 across the dunes. But get this, he didn't go alone. He actually brought his wife and kids along. It's pure insanity. But they made it, and they actually beat the Land Cruiser to the punch. That one trip is basically why the Patrol has such a legendary, unkillable reputation in Australia today. Mechanically, the thing was just a beast. Nissan moved on from that old bus engine and introduced the P engine, which was a massive 4-liter inline-six. Again, think about that. 4 liters in the 1960s is huge. It was putting out somewhere between 125 to 135 horsepower and about 217 pound-feet of torque, which was serious muscle for that era. Was it loud? Yeah. Was it crude and thirsty for fuel? Absolutely. But it was one of those machines that simply refused to die, no matter what you threw at it. Look, the 60s and 70s were legendary, but let's be real. By 1980, those old-school leaf springs and 3-speed gearboxes were starting to feel like ancient history. That's when they dropped the 160 series, which most people know as the MQ, especially in Australia, or the Safari back in Japan. But the real game-changer was on the inside. It had actual creature comforts. We're talking air conditioning, power steering, and a proper 5-speed gearbox. It finally felt like a modern vehicle. But things got really spicy in 1983 with the facelift. That's when they introduced the SD33T. That T stood for turbo, and back then, turbo was basically a magic word. You slapped that sticker on the door, and you were instantly the coolest person on the block. It was a 3.3-liter turbo diesel inline-six, and while 120 horses isn't going to win you any drag races, it finally gave the Patrol enough muscle to tow heavy loads and actually cruise on the highway without the engine screaming at you. Here's a fun bit of trivia for you. Did you know the Patrol actually has Spanish roots? To dodge those massive European import taxes, Nissan built the 260 series, often called the Ebro Patrol, right in Barcelona. It was basically the budget-friendly workhorse that stayed in production in Europe for years, even after the newer generations came out. Those usually had the RD28T engine, a smaller 2.8-liter turbo diesel that loved to rev. I honestly love these. That retro boxy look is totally coming back into style right now. Look, stop whatever you're doing because we finally made it to the big one. We're talking about the Y60, or as most of us know it, the GQ Patrol. For the off-road purists, this is the one. This is the absolute peak. You have to remember the context here. Back before it arrived, every other heavy-duty 4x4 on the market, even the Land Cruiser 60 series, was still bouncing around on leaf springs. They were tough, sure, but they rode like ox carts and had about as much flex as a brick. Nissan decided to completely flip the script. They gave the Patrol coil-sprung suspension with a 5-link live axle setup in the rear. It was actually so good that it forced Toyota to panic and build the 80 series just to keep up. And then there was the TD42 engine. I'm talking about a 4.2-liter naturally aspirated diesel inline-6. When people call this engine legendary, they aren't exaggerating. It's basically unkillable. You could overheat it, run it low on oil, or literally drown it in a river, and it would probably still fire right up. Now, is it fast? Definitely not. People call it the kettle because it takes forever to get boiling, but it will get you home. Plus, it handles aftermarket turbos like a champ. You can double the power without even breaking a sweat. Honestly, if you're looking for a project to turn into a serious rock crawler, get a GQ. The driveline is so over-engineered that people actually rip the differentials out of these and swap them into Jeeps and Land Rovers because Nissan's axles are basically unbreakable. Now let's talk about the Y61, also known as the GU. This landed in 1997, and honestly, it was the perfect evolution. The best part? They didn't go soft. They kept the heavy-duty chassis and those massive live axles. It also had an insane production run. It stayed on sale in Australia until 2016. And believe it or not, you can still buy a brand new one in certain parts of the world today. But the GU story is really a tale of two engines. The tragedy and the triumph. We have to talk about the elephant in the room first, the ZD30 engine. By the early 2000s, emissions was killing the big old diesels, so Nissan swapped the 4.2-liter for this high-tech 3-liter 4-cylinder. On paper, it was fine, but in the real world, it was a disaster. The early ones earned the nickname the hand grenade. You'd have pistons melting and blocks cracking. It was a total PR nightmare. Now, while the diesel guys were stressing out, the petrol guys were having the time of their lives. In 2001, we got the TB48DE. This was a 4.8-liter inline-6 with twin cams, built specifically to crush the Land Cruiser. In the Middle East, this engine, the VTC, is practically a religion. It's an iron block monster that can handle 1,000 horsepower on stock internals. The tuning scene in Dubai is just mental. They strip these things out, slap on turbos the size of watermelons, and go racing in the sand. You'll see 2,000 horsepower patrols gapping Ferrari SF90s and GTRs while climbing the dunes, screaming at 7,000 RPM and shooting flames. It's basically the 2JZ super engine of the 4x4 world. Then, in 2010, Nissan absolutely flipped the table with the Y62. They decided to pivot hard toward the luxury market, specifically aiming at the Middle East and the US. So they ditched the diesel and dropped in a 5.6-liter V8 petrol engine. We are talking 400 horses and 413 pounds-feet of torque. This thing is a literal rocket ship for its size, of course. It does 0 to 60 in about 7 seconds. When you consider that this is a 2.8-ton building on wheels, that is pretty fast. But the real magic trick is how they made a 3-ton SUV actually handle. It had this thing called HBMC, hydraulic body motion control. So basically, they ditched the sway bars entirely and replaced them with hydraulic cylinders on the shocks linked by pipes. On the road, when you turn, fluid pumps to the outer wheels to stiffen them up so the car corners flat. Then, off-road, when a wheel drops in a hole, the pressure equalizes to allow full travel. It works brilliantly. You really can't talk about the Y62 without mentioning its iconic status in the Gulf, though. In the UAE, it is the undisputed king of the highway. And just to prove the Y62 wasn't soft, Nissan pulled a massive stunt in 2013. They went to Sharjah Airport, hooked a standard Patrol up to a cargo plane loaded to 170 tons, and pulled it for 50 meters. Just imagine the strain on that transmission. But it did it and set a Guinness World Record. And because 400 horsepower apparently wasn't enough, they eventually made a Nismo version. It's tuned by the same guys who build the GTR engines, so it pushes 428 horses, rides on Bilstein suspension, and looks like a race car ate a monster truck. It is ridiculous, and I love it. Not only is it comfortable, but it's powerful and capable. Yes, it drinks fuel like a sailor drinks rum, but the smile on your face when you floor that V8 is worth every single cent. So I have to ask, after seeing all this, are you Team Patrol or Team Land Cruiser? Let me know in the comments.